Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome to another Saturday live study. Today, in this video, we are going to kind of finish up the kinesiology portion of Module 1 in this lesson, and that's going to be abdominals and core. So, I don't know, guys. Let me think. We did chest, back, arms, delts, glutes. So it's like five weeks, something like that, right? 5 weeks or so. I'm going to get Sheila in here 5 weeks or so. This kind of finishes it up with the muscle groups. Um, in this area of the module, the goal is to just understand the basic kinesiology and some biomechanics and some basic exercises that are used to train those muscles. We don't go that in depth. So, but let me go ahead and share my screen for you guys. And everybody see the screen? Yep.
Mhm.
Hey, Sheila. Good to see you. All right. So, guys, again, finishing up abdominals and core. They may be last on the list, but for sure they are not last when it comes to importance, are they? Right? In a sense, training the abdominals and the core is probably one of the more important areas of the body for the average person, but also for certain athletes, core and abdominal strength is critical to high level performance. We all know this, right? Do you remember? It's like it was years ago when all of a sudden this concept of the core, you got to train your core. Core is everything. Well, yeah, I guess in one sense it is. I mean, from a functional perspective, having strong abdominals and core muscles, i.e., the transverse abdominis and the internal external obliques. Remember, the core also involves the back muscles. So, technically, if we really wanted to get like really technical, we would have to include the entire girdle of muscle around the entire torso, which would include erector spinae. But generally, just for the sake of explanation and putting muscle groups into the way we train them, we normally just put core in with abdominals, right? Because that's the way we would train. We would train chest, shoulders, triceps one day, perhaps if that's the split that you're going to do, back and biceps. And then pretty much we would do abdominal training and slash core training at the end of a workout. So keep in mind, even though it says abdominals and core, core or the core musculature is the general name of all of the muscles. Abdominals fit underneath the core. They're not separate from a physiological perspective or an anatomical perspective. Does that make sense? In other words, abdominals are part of the core. So the
Core.
core is the general concept, meaning all of the muscles of that midsection, that area, essentially from the sternum all the way down to the pelvic, to the base of the pelvic or the pelvic floor. So technically, a lot of muscles are located in or used when we do core stabilization training. And that's normally the way I like to explain it to people is we don't just say we're going to train your core. It's core stabilization training. And one of the things to keep in mind, one of the things that makes abdominal training and more so core training in general a little different than the other muscle groups really comes down to this idea that core stabilization training, you got the word in the name, stabilization training, involves a lot of isometric contractile strength. Is everybody with me? Remember, we talked about the positive, the negative, right? Contraction. So you have the concentric contraction, eccentric contraction, and what? Isometric contractions, right? So one of the reasons the core stabilization training is critical because it provides a stabilized central point from which all the other muscles in the limbs can do their active movements. And so the core muscles in the core, those three that I'm showing you there, generally don't go through extended ranges of motion. Are y'all with me on this? This is a really important concept to understand. So when we're training the abdominals, even the lower back, and the transverse abdominis muscles, which kind of work no matter what you do, and the external, internal, external obliques, you don't want to be doing extended ranges of motion on those exercises. I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's really important that you understand this, that for the most part, these muscles tend to be most active in, I'm not saying they don't work through concentric and eccentric contractions, but those ranges of motion are very limited and they tend to function more so as a stabilizing central base of support. So they go into isometric contractions, meaning they contract and they hold. And so if my abdominals are contracted isometrically, if my obliques are contracted isometrically, in other words, they tighten up and hold everything, well, now I can do movements with my hands and my arms with a much stronger or much more stabilized central core support area. Does that make sense? So there's a
I
lot
see.
there is a lot to this, folks, that we don't need to get into because we're not training, we're not training high level athletes. Number one, which require more nuanced training, exercise performance, for the type of skill that they're doing. But the average person, yes, Sheila, go ahead and unmute.
So just to make sure I understood, because I'm thinking about the things we always tell people when we train them, or even when we do say tighten up that core, that's really to, from what you just said, stabilize your other range of motions.
Generally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So when
Makes
you're
sense.
and keep in mind that one of the reasons I don't go into a extended explanation with a client on this is because I know that no matter what they do from a resistance training's perspective, no matter what
Mhm.
exercises they ever do, guess what they do automatically? What you do automatically as soon as you start performing any exercises in the upper body or even the lower body, guess what you're going to do? You will intuitively, intrinsically, you will tense up the muscles in your
Mm.
abdominal region and your quote, your core. So you
Mhm.
do that automatically because that's what they're designed to do.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I don't get into an exhaustive explanation of it for people. But yes, you're correct. That's kind of the idea is that if people are having difficulties, we can, we can cue them. That's why cueing is so important. You can cue them and say, look, here's what I want you to do. You can poke them on the side or poke them in the belly or something. Say, I want you to tighten up right there. And one of the best ways to do that, by the way, is to simply kind of exhale. If you
Okay.
exhale with what we call pursed lips, as soon as you do this and you put some pressure, you
Oh
actually
yeah, I see. I
force
just did it.
the muscles of your core, and in fact, the intercostal muscles, all of those muscles tend to tighten up as you purse your lips and force air out. And if you all can try it right now, you can
Yeah, I
try it.
just did it.
Purse your lips and kind of force it. And what immediately happens? You can't stop it. You will immediately tense your abdominals. Also, again, keep in mind the abdominals, the rectus abdominis, that's what we call the abdominals, guys. That's the six pack, right? Those guys don't contract on their own. Everything works simultaneously. It's almost impossible, kind of like when we're talking about training the deltoids. You can't train one head of the deltoids. You can emphasize one over the other, but all three of them are going to work
Mhm.
automatically. It's the same thing with the abdominal region and the core, is that if you try to tense your rectus abdominis muscles, right, the anterior part, your six pack, everything contracts. You can't contract. You can't contract just one muscle is the idea, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's exactly the way we're designed. Um, the point is that it's critical that when you're training people, do not. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it even nowadays today. People doing side bends and all these rotational movements, and it's like, whoa, whoa, slow down. Don't do those things with people. Those extended ranges of motion are, that's a recipe for disaster for people because for the most part, our bodies, our abdominal region is meant to meant to be in isometric stabilized contractions to allow for this minor rotation and movement of the pelvis, and of course the legs, and then of course the upper body. So
So Doug, you saying like the love handles that and stuff is not
yeah, of
does
course
Kind
not.
of
nothing?
confusing.
Yeah, that's like 1960s,
So all that
1970s
stuff.
stuff. We got rid of that.
Wow.
You
Okay.
you said the word, Sheila. What are the love handles?
Just
What are the love
little
handles?
side, little side.
Yeah, it's not, the love handles are, they describe an area, right,
Uh,
that muscular wise are the external obliques. Now, it just
okay.
so happens that it's a great area to store body fat as well.
Yeah.
So, if you're an Olympic sprinter and you see those little bulges on the side because the dude's at 8% body fat, what are you looking at?
Distorted
You're looking
fat.
at muscles.
Muscles.
They don't
Okay.
have any body fat there.
Uh,
But when you look at the average person and you see the overhang, what do they call that? The muffin top?
muffin top.
You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Yeah.
What is that? That's not muscle.
That's stored fat.
That's body fat. So,
Uh-huh.
of course, we know you can't spot
So how do you
reduce.
get rid of it?
How do you get rid of what?
We thought
So
this right here was
Yeah, no, no, no,
sorry.
no, no, no. That's an old myth from about 50 years ago that we've dispelled pretty rare. That's your diet. That's your diet.
So
That's all it is. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you're not no exercise, no exercise that trains a muscle has any effect on the overlying body fat, subcutaneous body fat. Just because a muscle is here and body fat sits on top of it, they have zero communication with each other. So fat layers, subcutaneous fat, subcutaneous meaning cutaneous is skin. So subskin, underneath the skin, that's what's known as your subcutaneous fat. That fat has no physiological, for the most
mm,
part, no physiological communication with the muscle that it lies over. Does that make sense?
mm, yes.
Gotcha.
So that's
Muscle does what it does.
so that's why someone can be have muscle but still have the fat because their diet may be not what needs to get rid of. You can
Look at
kind of have
every Olympic weightlifter.
mm,
Every Olympic weightlifter that you see, men, especially the heavier weights,
mhm.
they have a tremendous amount of body fat. They do.
Okay.
But they got a boatload of muscle
Muscle
underneath there as
too.
well. Yeah.
Mm.
And so anything related to subcutaneous body fat is always going to be nutrition related. Does that make sense?
So let me see.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
Oh, so I'm looking at the picture,
Hmm.
and on the picture, like you're saying, I know this is, I have to like, for me, I have to like, think of something that I can remember it by. So I'm
Hmm.
looking at like, think about a tree and the stump,
Hmm.
that's what I'm thinking about. It comes to my
Okay.
mind, how that you can't actually bend it, move it, and so looking at the picture, it's showing, like you're talking about the core, how it's just it's there and the muscles all around it. And so it kind of makes sense. Like, so
Yeah,
if there's fat on,
you don't want to be bending it this way and that way. And by the
right, that's
way,
what I'm saying.
the
So
reason we don't do any side movements like this in the frontal plane has nothing to do with the muscles. It has everything to do with your spinal column. Your spinal column is
gotcha.
not designed, the spinal column is not designed for lateral deviation. That's why we have a condition called scoliosis, which is a lateral deviation, meaning that if you look at me from the front, your spine is laterally deviated one side or the other. The spinal column and all the vertebrae are not designed there's a little, don't get me wrong, there's a little bit, a tiny little bit, but that's not the function. That's why we're able to twist and turn. Think about if you're standing straight and your suitcase is on your left, you don't do a side bend to lift it up, do you? Of course not. You turn your torso and go down and
And
lift
to
it.
lift it up.
So turning is an important movement, but the extended ranges of motion that people do from an exercise perspective can be potentially dangerous. So we don't do
I
that with
I
folks.
just feel like that is so because they show so many exercise with that, even using the bands and I just think that's so misleading.
Yeah,
You know, it's
unfortunately, in the fitness world, the level of ignorance on the science of kinesiology and the science of biomechanics is sorely lacking. There's a lot of brilliant guys out there on YouTube that are, they know a lot about it. They will never tell you to do that. But fitness influencers, which is it's a totally different space. They're not, they're generally, they're not educated. So there it is. If you're not
yeah,
educated, if you're not educated, you're going to do whatever you want to do. And again, most people have learned from a generation of other, unfortunately, ignorant exercise influencers. So yeah, but as soon as you break it down and you see that that the biomechanics don't make sense, you go, what are you doing? And that's why people get hurt. That's why people get hurt, folks. That's why, as trainers, you need to understand these things. You need to be able to implement them. So that's why when we get to this and we look at those three groups of muscles that we're talking about, you got to be very, very careful the way you train them because everything you do from the core, unlike most of the other muscles we train, involves a lot of spinal flexion and extension. Does that make sense? So
hmm
here, when we move to the abdominals and core training, we have now involved, from a kinesiological perspective, the spinal column and the muscles that work in the spinal column, the smaller intrinsic muscles, the spinalis muscles, things like that in the spinal column, particularly the lumbar vertebrae. So this is why you got to be really, really careful. And that's why we tell you there's only a couple of exercises that you ever need to do. But how many exercises do you see influencers and people doing for abdominals? 10, 15, 20, 30. Don't get me wrong, there's multiple ways and nuances to movements of crunches. I mean, I even wrote it there. See it? Crunches with multiple variations. In other words, you can do a straight on crunch, which is great. You can do a crunch where you simply turn slightly, like one hand to the opposite knee, and that gets a little bit of a twist to the spinal column, which is not a problem. But doing extended twisting, no, 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 we don't want to be doing that. With not from a resistance training perspective. So reverse trunk curls, all of these things. There's only a couple of exercises that I ever do with clients for abdominals because I treat abdominals just like I treat every other muscle. I'll probably do higher reps, but that's your business how you're going to do that. So, but again, real quick, guys, you understand and you know the different muscles. And if you don't, I'm going to give them to you right now. The rectus abdominis, that's we call it the six pack because that's the one that's most visible. It's the most superficial of the abdominal muscles, the anterior part of your body. Starts from the sternum, which is that lower base, right up in your rib cage, up in here, so sternum, all the way down to the pubic bone, which is why it actually it turns the pelvis, it rotates the pelvis anteriorly and posteriorly. Well, it causes it to go posterior, but it's connected to the pubis, to the pubic bone, right? And so when it contracts, it brings your rib cage down and pulls your pelvis into a posteriorly rotated position, the butt tuck. You all know the butt tuck, right? Right. So when the butt tucks underneath, that's called posterior. That's a posterior turning of your pelvis, right? Does that make sense? Everybody got that? Okay. So the rectus abdominis is responsible for, therefore, what we call spinal flexion. That's when your rib cage collapses. Does that make sense? So the rib cage, remember how we always talk about keeping the rib cage elevated and up? When you're doing bench presses, curls, all these other exercises, we say keep the rib cage up. Well, that's actually spinal extension. What the abdominals do is they actually do the opposite. When you are in a supine position, you're lying on your back or something like that. In order to move the upper body, the rib cage up and forward requires the work of the rectus abdominis because it flexes the spinal column. It pulls you into what we call the fetal position. Does everybody know what the fetal position is?
Mhm.
Right, you know, a fetus, yeah, they scrunch forward like that. Well, that's one of the movements there is spinal flexion. Okay. So that's what it's responsible for. So spinal flexion, you can see posterior tilting of the pelvis. Remember, posterior tilting of the pelvis means that the superior aspect or the top part of the pelvis moves backward. So it rotates backward. If this is the superior, my pinky is the superior. Remember, superior on top, inferior underneath. So superior aspect of your pelvic bone, your pelvis, right, is at the top. Does that make sense? So the rectus abdominis pulls and rotates it posteriorly, and then your butt tucks underneath. Does that make sense? Yes, and then
I think so.
your
Yeah.
erector spinae muscles do the exact opposite. They cause anterior tilting of the pelvis. So posterior tilting is when your butt tucks underneath. That's what the rectus abdominis are responsible for. They also bring the rib cage right closer to your hips, essentially. The internal and the external obliques are responsible for isometric stabilization of the lumbopelvic hip
Yeah.
complex as well as torso rotation to a certain extent. So the internal obliques and the external obliques actually run opposite, their fibers run in opposite directions. So when the left external oblique is contracting, the right internal oblique is assisting with that movement. I know it sounds a little odd, but I'm just throwing that in there because people might ask. Okay, so that's how your body works. You have what's known as contralateral contraction of the internal external obliques on either side of the body. And so they help and assist each other to do torsional twisting movements. You'll notice, listen to what I said, twisting, torsional twisting, not side bends, holding 50-pound dumbbells because you think you're going to get rid of those love handles. No, in fact, what you're going to do is you're going to make it worse. Because number one, you're going to cause an injury to your spine. Number two is you're going to increase the hypertrophic effect on those external obliques, which you don't need to do that. And you don't want to do that. The third muscle group here are the transverse abdominis muscles. They act like a girdle in and around your entire core area. They are probably, if you want to say it like this, the main stabilizers of the lumbar spine and the pelvis. Okay. And so I even wrote in here, it essentially acts like a muscular girdle around the abdominal cavity. Now you can't palpate them because they're deep. They're underneath the rectus abdominis and the obliques, but trust me, they are there. So anytime you exhale, forcefully exhale, your transverse abdominis muscles contract heavily. Okay. Anytime you do a squat, anytime you do heavy movements for the upper body, the transverse abdominis muscles just tighten up intensely to hold your spinal column in place connected to the pelvis. There's a lot of other muscles that are working, but that's kind of where we're at with this. So, and one of the things that's really important to never forget is that it's responsible for visceral organ stabilization. What is keeping your liver, your small, large intestines, pancreas, spleen, what's keeping all of that in there? It's your abdominal muscles, right? And if I can be so crass, what helps you poop? Your abdominal muscles. Okay. So as long as everything's working okay in your intestines, right? As soon as you, quote, bear down, right? to have a bowel movement, you are contracting, you have to. You're contracting the abdominal muscles. All of those guys are tensing and contracting to help push the stool out of your body. If you're constipated, you know what happens, right? It's one of the reasons we don't want people to be constipated. We want people to drink lots of water and make sure that the stool is able to come out. And so the abdominals are responsible for a lot. Y'all get that? And you don't go to an abdominal class, right? Don't they have that in gyms? Don't, right? Ooh, the abdominal class, 30 minutes of abdominal training. How come they don't have a biceps class? 30 minutes of bicep training. Why don't they do that? Why? Because people are ignorant. That's why. And the gym knows it. And the gym knows that people think incorrectly that 30 minutes of abdominal training is going to have some effect on the fat underneath the abdominal skin or something like that. No, come on. And the moon's not made of green cheese. So, but for some reason, abdominal classes bring people in, don't they? They do for some strange reason.
Because we want those, we want that ripple effect.
Yeah, we
Yes,
want to,
right.
we don't want to do the hard work of dieting properly.
Yeah. So do you
So-
recommend about 5 minutes? I know I did a 5-minute ab workout and I was
That's it.
done.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Your abs
Okay.
get trained. Your abs get trained essentially the same amount of time you would put into your other muscle groups. The only difference is you can add a couple of more exercises to work the core stabilizing aspect of that
Okay.
area. So I can do crunches for a set, 2 sets, or whatever. You can do those different exercises, but then you definitely want to be doing exercises that will have some twisting motions associated with them, but not too much. Single leg. I mean, there's so many different exercises you could do. And so you want to obviously just kind of consider that when you're training clients, but you don't need to be doing 5, 6 different exercises for abdominals. Remember, for most people, just straight crunches and reverse trunk curls is enough for them, and their abs will get sore. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
Rosemary, any questions on that?
No, it explains a lot. I really like,
It's pretty
in the
straightforward,
classes.
folks. When we get to
but-
the abdominal part of training, we have generally finished whatever other muscle groups we have trained, right? So now what we want to do is we want to kind of wind down the workout by training the abdominals, giving it a good workout, doing some core stabilization exercises as well, without going overboard and spending 10, 15 minutes on abdominals. Please don't do that with folks. Remember also that just the exercises that they're doing with you, bench presses, dumbbell bench presses, any of the exercises for the upper body automatically force the abdominals and the core to stabilize. Okay?
Okay.
If you've ever done how many of y'all do push downs for your triceps? Right? Well, if you do push downs for your triceps, what do you have to do with your torso? You have to stabilize it forward, right? Well, what's stabilizing you forward? Your abdominals,
Abdominal. Yeah.
right? And Steve, what did Steve say? Steve said, I think it's quite frustrating training the abdominals without results. You have to define what you mean by without results.
Okay, so
Remember, your abdominals don't hypertrophy the same way your biceps do. In other words, when we say that our bicep training is effective, Steve, how do we know our bicep training is effective? They're getting what?
Big.
They might be getting bigger. I don't know. That's generally what people say. Oh, I'm getting bigger and my chest is, oh, okay, so it's effective. Is that what you want with your abdominals? We want the abdominals to get bigger and bigger and go, no, that's not what happens.
no, I think like you said earlier on, we usually refer to as 6 packs. You
Right.
were trying to build the muscles to separate those lines, and you notice a lot of time, you spend a lot of times on it, but then
Yep.
it's quite, it takes long.
And guess what we know? Every human being has a six pack or an eight pack. But where is it?
It's hidden.
It's
It's
under an
covered by
inch
the
of
fat.
it's under an inch of fat. You just can't
Yeah,
see
it's
it.
covered by the fat.
By the way, you don't even have to exercise. If you never exercised a day in your life, but got your nutrition dialed in and got down to 12% body fat, guess what you would see? You'd see your
Yeah,
abdominals.
yeah, it's true.
Does that make sense? One of the, people would always ask me, well, what's his body fat, do you think? What's her body fat? This and that. I say, well, just lift up the shirt. I can tell you like automatically or within 1 or 2 percentage points, what your body fat is just by looking at your abdominal definition. That's it. If I can't see separation in your rectus abdominis, I know you're at about 18 to 20% body fat. I don't care what you think it is. I'm telling you, that's what it is. If I can see a slight outline of a six pack, like just a slight outline, what am I looking at now? I don't know, 15, 16% body fat. As soon as I see somebody where I can go, damn, that dude's got a six pack, I'm looking at 12 to 13% body fat. It could even be 11 or whatever the case is. Does that make sense? So it has literally zero to do with your exercising. That's why we only need to train for 25 minutes, 30 minutes max. You don't need to exercise for an hour, 2 hours. That's a waste of your time. You need to train really hard for 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes. I'm talking about the average client. And then you need to get your diet on point because you got to do the two. But nutrition by far is the most important component when it comes to this issue with abdominals. And I will say this, for most people, because they do have insulin resistance and other issues and problems, the abdominals is going to be one of the last places that they see the body fat kind of dissipate from. Depends on the person, of course, but that's the general understanding, right? Rosemary.
Sorry, I'm just I'm gonna go ahead and log off if I can.
We are going to finish, by the way, Rosemary. We are done. You held in for the whole time, so that's really good. Anybody, any other questions? No?
Doug, I do have one other question
Yes.
in reference to the
Rosemary,
core.
if you got to
Sorry.
go, Rosemary, go for it.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
so
we'll
much.
see you.
I appreciate you.
Have a great day. Yes, Miss
So,
Sheila.
so we were going back to when we was talking about contracting the abs and the core. So when you're doing because I guess in my mind I always thought that to say I honestly learned a lot today because I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm trying to build more muscles to get the ripple effect, whatever. But I realize now, no, it's just really defining and separating the abs to where it have more of a definition.
You already have
But
a six. You already have a six
right.
pack.
Well,
It's
and
there.
I noticed that just as I did a personally lifestyle change in my eating, and I've lost all the inches and everything just by my diet alone. Like I noticed a complete change, and I say I got a 2 pack because I can see what was behind it, like the first two. But mentally, I guess I was thinking when you're doing certain exercises, like just say you're doing standing up. What do you call it? I can't think of the term right now, but you're just standing up and you're working your abdomen, bringing your legs and stuff up, gauging that core. Are those exercises actually, or when you're say you are doing uh curls and naturally, like you say, you're going to suck the stomach and gauge that core. That's what we typically, those are terms I use with my students, gauge that core. Are we actually exercising those muscles in our core too?
Yeah, sure. Sure you
Okay.
are. Yeah, of course. Remember,
Okay.
those muscles are the rectus abdominis has a oddly enough, a relatively high percentage of type 2 fibers
Okay.
to them. So that's your fast twitch fibers. But um, the other muscles have predominantly type 1 fibers associated with them. So they're endurance based fibers. And that's you make sense, right? Because they need to
Right.
be contracted for extended periods of time. So
Yeah.
when it comes to abdominal training, you train the abdominals and be done with it. All the other ancillary um, kickoff effect that you get from doing other exercises is just bonus.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just bonus.
Okay.
So don't, I'll say it this way, don't focus too much on it,
Yeah.
but don't not focus on it.
Yeah.
Train them appropriately, train them, put some resistance on them. I like to use resistance training on abdominals anytime I can. I like to grab I've got a pulley machine so I can grab handles and I can do pull
Mm-hmm.
downs. Right? You
Mm-hmm.
guys have seen those before. It's a great exercise
Mm-hmm.
to put some additional stress on the abdominals. But at the end of the day, it's your diet from a visual
Yeah.
perspective. It's your diet that's going to show you any of
Yeah.
that stuff anyway. Does that
Yeah.
make
Now,
sense?
yes, and I do. I'm sorry. One last. So protecting that tailbone, because um, where I work out at and my students and stuff is typically a hard floor. We're in the gym floor. So my thing with them protecting that tailbone, thinking out of the spine and doing proper, like if we're doing crunches or anything, they're working that. How do what's the mechanism? Because it seemed like if you're not on a ball or something like that and you're on your back, you're feeling that pain on your tailbone and on your spine.
I'm not
So
sure why you would feel pain in the
well, it's
tailbone.
just because I guess you're on a hard surface. It's not like a pain like some, but you're on a hard surface.
Yeah,
Is that safe though for your spine? That's what
I
I'm.
mean, I guess if it causes pain or discomfort, you probably would want to reconsider maybe putting something underneath. But
Yeah,
is it
even with the
causing
minutes.
is no, I mean if it's going to cause bruising,
Yeah,
yeah, you could get bruising, but the amount of time that especially a kid is spending on the ground,
yeah.
it's just uncomfortable.
Okay.
I normally put my hands up underneath my
Yes,
my
and
glutes
yes,
when I
and
do it.
yes, and that's
That's
what
how
I
I
get.
that's how I
Yeah, and
personally
that's
do it.
that's my typical go-to too. I just wanted to make sure now understanding that all of the extras and stuff, that's just, it could injure or harm, but I just want to make sure, like, we're not doing anything while working out the abdomen to mess up that spine and mess up that lower back. So,
Generally, if it's not hurting while you're
okay.
doing it, I
Okay.
wouldn't be too concerned. But yeah,
Okay.
of course, if it's uncomfortable
Yeah.
and somebody's feeling it back there, I guess you'd have to make sure that the reason it's bothering them is because of the compression on the
Discomfort.
hard
Yeah.
surface versus it being something else
Okay.
that I
Makes
wouldn't know.
sense. That
So,
makes sense.
okay.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
guys. Any other questions? Ainsley.
Um, I was just wondering if you're training the transverse abdominis through different movements like bicep curls, other training, like we said, are there core movements that also would train it or
Yeah,
no?
anytime you compress the spinal column through spinal flexion, those guys are working. Anytime you twist and turn, those guys are definitely coming in pretty heavy.
All
But
right.
again, mainly what they do is they essentially squeeze your midsection inward. If you get what I'm saying, right?
Uh-huh.
Decreasing the diameter of the circumference of your midsection
Okay.
because again, the muscles are transverse, so they don't go the whole way around, but their fiber direction when they contract literally squeezes the midsection together. So anytime you exhale, that the transverse abdominis can be considered an ancillary muscle for breathing in some cases. There are some people who have respiratory problems, and a
Mhm.
doctor can look at that individual and they can tell if they're using secondary apparatus for breathing. In other words, the main apparatus for inhalation is what muscle? It's the diaphragm.
Uh-huh.
Okay? So when the diaphragm works and somebody takes a breath, they go, "See how I'm doing this?"
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the only muscle involved in that particular part of the breathing process. When I exhale, the diaphragm doesn't do anything. The diaphragm relaxes. So what's forcing the air out? Well, it's the pressure of the air already in the lungs. And so there's going to be a normal, right, exit of the air out because of the normal depressurization that you just created. But you have other muscles, all the muscles in your rib cage, what are known as the intercostal muscles. Those guys, if you need to forcefully exhale, they contract, and like an accordion, they compress the rib cage, and that
Mm-hmm.
forces the air out. Now, if I have lung issues, right, I'll use ancillary muscles, and one of the muscle groups that I'm going to use, right, is going to be muscles up in my neck. You'll see people do this. They'll go, right. Have you ever seen that? They
Yeah.
have to use other muscles because the diaphragm doesn't work or there's issues, there's pulmonary issues going on. But it's the transverse abdominis muscles that, believe it or not, will come into play if you need to forcefully exhale. That's why I just showed you.
Okay.
If you purse your lips, you are closing the channel for air to escape, to exhale. So what you're doing is you're building up interthoracic pressure. And interthoracic pressure is going to involve that tensing of the entire thorax is going to include the abdominal. Remember, you can't do one without the other. And so the transverse abdominis muscles can become heavily involved when you do this. It's the same thing with taking a poop. Crazy.
Yeah.
It's like one end and the other, right? So they are working, they are involved with just about everything.
Okay.
So treat them with respect and care. How's that? All right, guys. Well, yeah, good talk today. Look, for those of you watching this video, please remember to subscribe to the channel. If you got any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. If you want to come back next Saturday, I think we're starting. What did I say, guys? Was it energetics, bioenergetics? I think. Yeah, I think we're doing bioenergetics. So that's a good one. You don't want to miss that one. So y'all have a great, great weekend. Since it's next week, at this time we're doing this video. Thanksgiving is next Thursday. So have a good one. You guys take care, and we'll talk later. See you guys.